Hello and welcome to today's workshop, Recruitment and Retention for Nonprofit Organizations. My name is Lynn Gidluck, and I have the privilege of leading the Community Engagement and Research Center at the University of Regina. We have a couple of members of our board of directors here today with us, Elena Harrison with Inclusion Saskatchewan and Kendra Giles with Phoenix Residential Society. Thank you for all that you do in helping with our work. It's so nice to see you here today. You can give a wave to everybody if you like. I'm so happy that so many of you were able to join us today on this very blistery winter day for the second of 3 sessions in our fall 2021 Toolkit workshop series, Human Resource Fundamentals for the Nonprofit Sector. I admit I'm one of those annoying people that actually likes winter. Okay, by February, when Saskatchewan gets that month of -40 weather, I probably get as grumpy as the next person, but early on in the season, I say, bring it on. Lots of snow for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing, and thank goodness our new Welsh Corgi puppy loves jumping around in the snow, but I digress. Back to business. These workshops are brought to you by the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation and the University of Regina's Community Engagement and Research Center. We really gratefully acknowledge the wonderful work that the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation does in our community, and their sponsorship of these professional development opportunities allows us to pay small honorariums to our community facilitators. Without this sponsorship, I would be limited to just begging people who work at the university to lead sessions for free. Or I would have to charge a fee for these sessions. And I know many of the people that join us at these sessions, wouldn't be able to attend otherwise. So thank you, South Saskatchewan Community Foundation. I'd like to recognize Karen Henders for a minute. Karen is Director of Community and Grant Stewardship for the Foundation, and she also leads the Foundation's Vital Signs Community Network. I really enjoy going to their quarterly meetings to hear members of the nonprofit sector discuss the work they're doing. And I always find that I leave having learned about new opportunities for partnerships and opportunities for collaboration. The meetings are very well worth my time. So if you aren't already a member of the community network, it might be something you want to consider. Now, today's workshop is taking place online, and we have people from across the country, I think, joining us, definitely across Saskatchewan anyways. The South Saskatchewan Community Foundation and the Community Engagement and Research Center have physical homes on the traditional territory of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota First Nations, and the homeland of the Métis. We recognize Treaty 4, which was signed in this territory, and acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past as we work for a better future through the work we do with communities. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to our fabulous facilitator, Millie, who's a HR professional with 16 years of experience in a variety of HR roles at the Public Service Commission in Saskatchewan. If you have a minute, it would be great if you could take a moment just to introduce yourself in the chat, your name and the organization you're with, just to give Millie a bit of an idea of who's attending today's workshop. And also if you came here with any specific question that you have in mind that would be helpful for her to ponder. In any event, with that, I'm going to pass things over to Millie.
Thanks so much, Lynn, and good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe and warm in this crazy winter wonderland that we woke up to this morning. Thanks again, Lynn and the University of Regina for inviting me over to facilitate this session. Today, as Lynn mentioned, we're going to be talking about recruitment and retention, some strategies. We're going to be discussing a bit of tools and tips and tricks that can help you address your recruitment and retention needs within your organization. I wonder if we can go to the next slide, Lynn.
Okay, let's see if I can figure this out.
Yeah.
Okay, trying to figure this out, Millie.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. So here's a quick agenda. And if I can ask everyone to please mute themselves,
Okay.
that would be great. I think I hear some voices in the background. Thank you. A bit of an agenda for today. So I'm going to be walking you through like very quickly through the recruitment cycle and what it's really included. What are the elements of the recruitment process? Then we'll talk about some key considerations and some of its best practices. Then we'll go into breakout sessions and have a little activities about the interview process and an opportunity for you to kind of analyze the scenario and think about what worked, what didn't work, what we should do and what we should not do. Then we moved into employee retention, and we'll talk about, you know, like some of the key foundational things about employee retention. What can we do? Then we'll talk about key elements of developing retention strategies. And then we'll have a time to also have a collaborative conversation on your own retention challenges. So what has been working, what hasn't been working, what have you done, and an opportunity for you all to collaborate. I know from the last session we facilitated, I heard a lot of people taking a lot of value from the group conversations. So I'm hoping that you can all share the things that are working and not working for you. Feel free to add questions to the chat. I'll try to monitor those as much as you can. If you have a specific question, you can also raise your hands, but at the end, I'm sorry, I hear lots of voices, so if you could please mute yourself, that would be fantastic. At the end of the presentation, we'll also have another opportunity to address any particular questions that you may have that we may have not covered, but feel free again to share those through the chat. We can move to the next slide, Lynn, please. Thank you. So I wanted to spend some time talking about like all the stages of the recruitment cycle, kind of to create that base knowledge of, you know, what is really included. And there's quite a few different models that speak about the recruitment life cycle, but in general, they talk about 6 stages through the recruitment cycle. You'll start by preparing, then you move into your sourcing, and then you move into your screening, selecting your candidate, hiring your candidate, and then bringing them on board. So what are some of the key things that you can see through the preparation? A needs assessment. So a needs assessment relates to, you know, your vacancy, the position that you're looking to fill, the type of job, your job description, right? Looking at your job description, is your job description current and accurate? Do you have an ideal understanding of the kind of person that you want to hire? And then building your job ad or your job posting. So that's kind of all your preparation and kind of your initial steps into moving through the recruitment. Then you're moving to sourcing. What is sourcing about? Sourcing is about identifying what are those job sites where you're going to be posting your job. What do your talent pools look like? And do you have the opportunity to access a talent pipeline? And we'll talk a little bit more about talent pipelines when we go into detail through this. Your screening is about looking at the applicants that you receive through your competition, right? So generally through your screening, you're looking at assessing your candidate's application via resume most of the time, compared to your skills, knowledge, and abilities, competencies that you're looking for in the vacancy that you're trying to fill. Then after you do your screening, you move into your selection. So this is the actual known interview process. So some of the key things there is that, you know, using assessment guides or interview guides, testing or alternate testing. You know, some organizations do other things that are different to interviews. Some organizations do pre-screening interviews. So there's a variety of different tools that you can use through the selection. But ultimately, your selection process is about that validation. So you would have done your initial assessment of the individual's competencies, knowledge, abilities, and skills through the resume screening. But in the interview process, you're actually validating that they actually have those skills that you require for the position that you're looking to hire. So is that full evaluation. After you've completed your selection process, you will probably end up with 1, 2 candidates, depending on, how that pool look like. But generally in the hiring stage, we're looking at conducting reference or background checks, determining whether you have more than one candidate and how you make a decision to hire your top candidate. Sometimes you maybe hire multiple positions, so then ensuring that you have all the appropriate checks in place to hire the individual or individuals into your role. And a key part of the hiring process is also that negotiation piece. So salary is kind of the key piece that individuals and that you will work with your candidates in the negotiation phase of the hiring part. And then the last part, or the last chunk of the recruitment process, is what we call onboarding. So in the hire stage, you would have had an acceptance from a candidate or candidates that you wanted to hire, and then you move into onboarding. So what is included in the onboarding? Well, there's something that we call pre-boarding, and relates to that date or ongoing contact that you will have with the candidate prior to the start date. It will include your new employee orientation, if you have access and you deliver one. It could also have on-the-job related training for that individual to actually be successful into that role. Any questions so far? I want to make sure that if there's any specific questions about this, that I can address those. I'm trying to see. For some reason, I'm unable to see the chat box, Lynn. Why is the chat box not showing up for me? I cannot see the chat box, so I don't know if there's any questions on the chat. Oh, here we go. There we go. I don't see any specific questions yet. So maybe we can move into the next slide.
Okay. You're having chat issues. I'm having keyboard issues here. Oh, there we go.
There we go. So I want to go a bit deeper into what are some of those key considerations, and really looking at those best practices through each of those 6 phases of the recruitment life cycle. So we'll start with preparing. And what is it that we look at when we go through the preparation? So I think I made a quick reference around that needs assessment piece. So what is it that we need to fill? What is it that we need to do to fill that vacancy? Do we have a clear understanding of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that that person brings? Remember that I think the overall intent of the recruitment process is to make sure that we find the right person for the right job at the right time, right? Like that's kind of the key things. Right person, right job, right time. So you've got to make sure that all of those pieces fit together. So doing a needs assessment, is your vacancy temporary? Is it permanent? Is it full-time, part-time? So some of that basic understanding of the positions that you're trying to fill. Then looking at your ideal candidate. So what does our ideal candidate look like? So that's again looking into, qualities that would work and would align with the culture of your organization. Then looking at your current job description, and I think that's a very important step through that preparation process, is to ensure that if you have a job description for the job that you're looking to hire, that it is current, updated, and that it actually reflects the work of the individual. As we navigate individuals from the moment that they get hired to the moment that they end their employment with your organization, one of the foundational pieces is that we've created clear expectations of what the work looks like, and that comes from that job description. So to have a successful employee, you need to have a clear expectation, and your job description kind of creates that base knowledge for them. Then, many organizations use competencies, some other use knowledge, skills, and abilities. Basically, they're all pretty much the same, but what they do is they identify what are those basic things that your employee needs to have, or your candidate needs to have, in order to successfully perform the duties of that position that you're trying to fill. Some of their things around best practices talk about the importance of having a clear and attractive job ad, and also using and sharing your mission, vision, and core values through your job posting. So that's kind of a little bit into your job posting section. When we move through the sourcing piece, what are you looking at sourcing? So we had talked about sourcing being related to things like, where am I going to post a job? Where is that pool of talent that I'm going to be looking at to attract my candidates? So many organizations, and if you do have your own career site, you will probably end up posting your job in that career job site. Sometimes it's looking at external job boards or external career websites that can help you market and spread the word around the positions that you're trying to fill. Some of the things that work really well for organizations, depending on the roles, is actually networking and contacting post-secondary educations. Many of the post-secondary educations have job boards for students, or even their grad students or alumni, that it's a great way to reach out to sometimes even your passive candidates, which is the next section. Your active candidates are those that will actively be seeking employment and looking at job postings and job boards. But there's also those other passive candidates that may not be looking actively for a job, but that you need to find a way to reach out to them, to attract them to potentially your job and your position within your organization. So what are some of the ways that we can use to reach out that passive candidate? Social media has become an extremely popular tool for attracting passive candidates lately. LinkedIn, it's a very, very popular one that it's used. So many organizations are actually using social media to connect with others that would have ideal profiles for the positions that you're looking at. Employee referrals, it's another great way to attract passive or candidates in general. So if your organization has employee referral programs, making use and access of those during the sourcing stage is critical. If you don't have a formal, excuse me, if you don't have a formal employee referral program, you can still find ways to, share and spread the job postings with your employees within your organization for them to share with others they think might be interested in the positions that you're trying to fill. Networking is always a great way to attract both active and passive candidates. So if you have the ability to attend career fairs, which I know many of them now have moved into the virtual world with the COVID-19, but networking with career fairs is a great opportunity. But also, if you have opportunity to network with other organizations outside that would provide you opportunity to attract candidates to your organization, I think that's a great way to attract candidates. The other piece around sourcing is that we often look at internal candidates. So what is our opportunities for promotion or internal mobility for some of the current staff? So you always want to start from looking in within, and if you have opportunities to fill your vacancies internally, it might create another vacancy somewhere else within the organization. But when we move into retention, we'll talk a little bit more about the importance of internal mobility for staff. The next phase on the recruitment cycle is the screening phase. So what is foundational during the screening phase? Number one is that you have a clear criteria of those elements that you're going to be assessing each candidate application through. We need to be fair, objective, and consistent in that review. So it's always recommended that you use one standard and the same criteria. I call it the lens that you're looking through every single application to make sure that you're giving every applicant a fair, objective, and consistent review of their application. Another of the things around screening is not waiting too long. I can't tell you enough how many times I've worked with clients that have waited on to move through the screening process or even reaching out to candidates. And by the time they try to get a hold of someone who had applied through the competition, they would have found another employment. So, I think as soon as your competition closes, moving through the screening, it is highly recommended. So you can actually make sure that you don't lose the candidates that would have applied for your posting. Some organizations are, and it's really becoming more increasingly common to use pre-screening interviews or pre-screening questions. Sometimes if you use an applicant tracking system, like an electronic system where your candidate will enter their resume and submit their application to your organization, sometimes those organizations will generally have, like you can include some pre-screening questions there. And in pre-screening questions, maybe questions that will help you even add another layer of assessment to the applicant. So an example of a pre-screening question could be, like if I'm looking for someone with experience in accounting, I can ask a pre-screening question that said, please briefly outline your experience conducting ABC as related to the accounting process. So, if you feel that you have the ability or it's something that you're interested in, it is a tool that you can use to further assess your applicants through the application process. Another thing that I always think that is critical through the screening process is about checking our personal biases. And that relates to making sure that, if we have any preconceived or preconceptions about individuals, cultures, or educations, or things, that we check those out the door, and that we really give that fair, consistent, and objective review to the resumes and applications that are coming through you. And then the last piece of that is your shortlisting. So it's always recommended that after you've done your screening, you select the top, 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on your time availability, the number of applicants, those candidates that you are interested in interviewing. I see that there's a couple of questions in the chat room. What is a good amount of time between advertising and close? That's a great question, Rhonda. I would say, and this is probably the typical HR answer, it depends. And I think there's a number of factors that I would keep into consideration. Is it a hard to recruit position? And, like, have you tried to advertise this position in the past and noticed that you've had challenges attracting a population? Generally, what I see is 2 to 3 weeks seems to be kind of a standard. Some organizations, and also I think it depends on whether you work within a unionized or non-unionized organization. Sometimes collective bargaining agreements for unionized organizations set the parameters around your amount of time for advertising. Sometimes there's quick turnarounds for some of the postings. If you have a strong talent pool and you know that you're going to have a fair number of applicants, or that are some of those positions where you notice you receive a large number of applicants, sometimes organizations choose to advertise their job postings for a week to also minimize the number of applicants. So I think it'll depend. I hope that answers your questions a little bit, Rhonda. I wonder if we can move into the next slide, Lynn, please.
Sorry, my computer is having issues. Oh, there we go.
Wonderful, thank you. So these are the next 3 phases of the recruitment cycle. Your selection. So what is the selection about? So we talked about, what are some of those key considerations that you need to keep in mind while you go through the selection? I can't emphasize enough the importance of preparing yourself for the actual recruitment, meaning the interviews, the meeting of the candidates, the assessments, and making sure that you have all your pieces in place, organized in a way that you know what you're going through. but also preparing your candidate. So one of the things that I believe it's critical is that communication with the candidates. As I mentioned before, sometimes some of the pitfalls around staffing is that we don't reach out to candidates soon enough and they lose interest. So as soon as you're ready to move through that phase, just communicating with your candidates around what's going to be involved in the recruitment process. What can they expect? What are some of the things they can do to prepare for the interview process? Those are all great things that you can do to build a positive relationship with your candidates. Remember, you may not hire them through the process, but there might be other opportunities in the future that these candidates could be eligible for. But also, it's a great way to build your talent pipeline, your talent pool, and ensure that, it's also a way of like branding your organization. It's giving a good image of how you treat your candidates through the interview process. So preparation, I think it's one of those key things that you need to consider through that process. Interview panels, what is interview panel? So I know sometimes organizations are really small that you do not have the ability to have more than one person navigating through the interview process. But some of the best practices around recruitment always talk about having a group of individuals being available to conduct interviews. That allows for a number of things. I think it allows for, again, a more fair, consistent, and unbiased assessment of candidates, but also you have someone that you can check your ideas, your thoughts about someone's qualifications. So if you have the ability and the possibility to have a panel member, even if it's two of you, I think that's a great practice to go through the interview process. Another of the most and the key considerations here to think, it's about using one and a consistent assessment guide. So sometimes individuals may have concerns about recruitment process, may have concerns about how the assessment was done, and they could actually go to the Human Rights Commission and claim that they may have been discriminated through that process. And if you've ever gone through that, you may have some experience, but if you have not, some of the things that go through is a really deep look into how you conducted your interview process. If you have a unionized organization and your hiring process is part of your collective agreement and decisions on hiring or interview process can be grieved, then a grievance process can also be a very comparable, in-depth look into how you process. And the most fair and consistent way to assess individuals is by asking everyone the same questions. So I know that through the interview process, you will generally prompt and ask deeper questions to gain a better understanding of an individual's experience or competency level or skills or knowledge, which is okay because it's not about restricting you from asking prompt questions and getting deeper into understanding the skills, but it's about ensuring that you are applying the same questions consistently across the organization, across all your candidates. So sometimes, and I've had clients that have asked specific questions to a candidate that I have felt give them an advantage compared to others and have not asked the same question to everyone. So if you find yourself asking a question that you feel will give a lead or an advantage to someone, consider adding them to all your candidates. Again, the type of questions you ask through your interview and your assessment process should always be tailored to those competencies, skills, knowledge, and abilities that you're looking for. I know many organizations in the past and like old practices will have some of those really odd questions, and I'm sure that you all have, if you look into recruitment videos and things like that, you may find some old practices where people will ask really strange things like, what animal do you identify with? Like, I know that I've heard that one quite a couple times through my life. And, like, how does that relate to the position that you're looking to fill? So again, it's about connecting the dots between the knowledge, skills, abilities, those measurable elements of the position that you're trying to hire for through the interview questions that you're going to be asking through the interviews. Another best practices is just finding a quantifiable way to assess your competencies. So many interview models and interview guides use a scoring system. And a scoring system could be, like adding or attaching a number of points per question. Some other interview guides go as much in detail as to adding some of the key things that you are expecting to hear through a particular answer. So again, it's just looking about how can you measure in a quantifiable way the results of that interview process. And the last best practices is about using alternative assessment methods. So there are positions that are very challenging and difficult to assess through interview process. For example, if I'm looking for a receptionist and a key role of that person is going to be, typing, entering a lot of data and entering a lot of information, and the speed of typing, it's critical because they get a lot of volume on the number of typing that they need to do. Perhaps you want to use a typing test. So if you are hiring for someone who does a lot of community engagement and they need to do a lot of presentation to clients in the community or organizations or post-secondary institutions, so that client and stakeholder engagement, perhaps you may want to use ask the candidate to prepare a presentation, and a portion of their interview would be dedicated to that individual demonstrating their presentation skills, and it gives you a better idea as to how those skills look like in action. So those are some of the things that have become increasingly popular through the years in ways that help us assess someone's qualifications for a job. So through your selection, you would have ended up with your shortlisting and your even your scoring and finding whether you have a successful candidate or several individuals that you might be interested in, and then you're moving into hire. So generally, you're hiring your top candidate for the role, and your top candidate would be that person that had, if you're using a quantifiable method, it would be the one that would have had your high score. Sometimes if you work for a unionized organizations, sometimes they will have seniority based in considerations into the process. So make sure that your decisions are aligned with your organization's internal policies and procedures around how you come up with your top candidate. Another important piece that I think I talked about is background references. What I forgot to mention before is the importance of setting expectations early in the process with candidates that you will be conducting reference checks or background checks. Like, for example, in the government of Saskatchewan, many of our positions require a criminal record check. So one of the things that we notify candidates is that's part of the process. And in order to be able to be hired into the organization, you need to have a criminal record check completed. So if you have a special, I'm sure many of your organizations, if you work with vulnerable populations, you may have a vulnerable sector criminal record check, or an enhanced criminal record check with fingerprints, whatever that looks like. It's always a good practice to include those background checks either through your job posting or through the interview stage. So whatever works for you, I don't think there's a particular difference or preference as to where you want to post. Then you move into creating your job offer. But of course, prior to, and sometimes negotiations happen before your job offer or after your job offer. So, generally when you're moving through the reference checks, if you needed to validate with the individual that you were conducting reference checks on them, that they may have perhaps a feel that they're even consider more closely a potential candidate, and they may have questions or requests around what the positions look like. I'm just looking that there's a couple of other questions here. Including other staff in recruitment and hiring also helps with succession planning by providing experience. Absolutely, I think that's a great opportunity to give people opportunities for experience. And talking around about that, some of the things that you may also want to consider for succession planning here through the hiring process is in regards to providing practice interview opportunities for your staff. You may have a candidate that is not qualified enough to do the job, but you want to give them an opportunity to go through the interview process to gain experience, to gain a better understanding of what the work looks like, but also to help them identify those areas they need to work on. It's a great thing. So thanks so much, Rhonda, for bringing that comment up, because I think that's a great way to link the recruitment process with succession planning and retention. So negotiations are something that you all will work with. And, sometimes you have the flexibility to negotiate a salary, depending, again, do you work for a unionized organization? Do you have a broad salary range where you have opportunities? Like, what does your compensation policies look like? But generally, you will have some sort of negotiation with your candidate that would relate to even conversations around what benefits are available, what start and date times. We now live in a remote world, so some organizations offer opportunities for people to work remotely under certain circumstances. So during the negotiation phase, you'll probably get to touch a lot of those technicalities about what is needed for the individual to start working. Then your job will be accepted or denied. If it's accepted, then of course you move into probably regretting unsuccessful candidates. If your job is denied, then it brings you back into the table to re-strategize for posting again, or finding other alternatives to fill in your vacancy. And your last phase is your onboarding, which really, as I mentioned before, once you have your successful candidate, it's that maintaining that communication with your new employee prior to the start date. So that's what we call pre-boarding. Preparing your job site for the start date of the individual. So just looking at, if you have a workspace, if you have computer systems, if they're working remotely, what do they need? Just getting ready for that person to really start coming, and also sharing with them any documents that they need to fill prior to the start date. So I assuming, like benefit forms or payroll documents that they will need in order to be compensated and paid. So all of your preparation documents for your onboarding or start date. Prepare with a welcome and introduction. I think it's a great thing to, prior to the person joining the organization, to send a communication within your organization about that individual joining and giving a quick, bio of the person, the role that they're going to be working, and how can they be found, and things like that. Then, of course, your orientation. So getting them to understand your organization, the work that they do. If you have an onboarding plan, this is a great time to get your employee to go through that onboarding plan and understand, what is the foundational training or milestones that they need to hit to, be successful for the first 6 to 12 months of their employment with your organization. One of the other things that I just want to mention quickly through this, and I think I mentioned the potential challenges from human rights, but I put together a document with some resources, and one of the ones that I added there, it's around questions that we can and cannot ask as employers, and I think it's always a good document to keep in mind, especially if you don't have a lot of recruitment experience, or you don't get to recruit on an ongoing and regular basis. I think recruitment is one of those skills that the more that you get to do recruitment, the more comfortable and confident you feel with it. But if you hire very random or sporadically, then it is important to make sure that you kind of have a checklist of things that you need to go through. Another thing that through the hire process that I wanted to mention is you may also get potential requests for accommodations from candidates. And under the Human Rights Code, we're also, as employers, obligated to meet accommodations for employees that request accommodation to the point of undue hardship. So something for you to consider, that you may get candidates to request accommodations through that process. We can move to the next slide, if we can, Lynn, please.
Oh,
Okay, I just want to quickly touch base on some other big best practices that are more of thinking about recruitment on a more strategic way, and things like building strategies, specific targeted strategies for positions. It's something that we encourage, or I would encourage you to do. So, we're no longer living a world where one size fits all. So, and we live in a world where we have a lot of specialized positions. So building and developing targeted strategies for filling particular jobs, it's probably the way that you want to go. I have some resources to help you with that as well. So they will be shared at the end of the session today. I had mentioned and briefly talked about talent pipelines. So, what is a talent pipeline? A talent pipeline is a place where you can actually get candidates coming through your organization on a regular. So you have a steady stream of talent. So that relates to your active, your passive, your networking of candidates. So, and you need to work on potentially, if you have especially hard to recruit positions, or your position has struggles with a particular job, considering talent pipelines and creating strategies around how you build a talent pipeline, it's a great way to go. It is important, and it also helps you with the branding of your organization, which is the next item that I have after. Branding really helps with that attraction piece, right? So, ensuring that your organization has a clear mission, vision, and that you do the best that you can to create that awareness to candidates of who you are as an organization. I think that is key for a nonprofit organizations. Many of us that have worked for nonprofit organizations, we connect with the reason and the why of that organization. So ensuring that you have that clear brand in your whole recruitment process, it's going to help you really have a bigger attraction, right? Like you'll be able to make that connection with candidates. Some of the things that have also helped organizations with recruitment is accessing things like internships or new grad placements or job placement programs. So if you have the ability to access any of those, it's a great way to build a current and a future talent pool. Many post-secondary educations will now have co-op programs. And if you have the ability to provide co-op programs or placements for students, it's a great way to get your name out there, to get potential future employees, but also to have someone to come work for you and carry the work about what great organization you are. So if you can access those programs, it's great. I think we talked about, and Rhonda had mentioned about your internal talent and your succession management, succession planning. So this is always something that you want to look into. Like sometimes even before going and posting the job externally, you might look at your internal staff. So do you have anyone internally that can move into the position? Sometimes it's not just about a promotional opportunity, but lateral opportunities provide a lot of growth for employees. And, I have through my career moved laterally, not necessarily upwards. I've actually moved downwards for opportunities where I felt I really wanted to take on something very different and new in my career. So, looking at your internal talent and opportunities for them to move throughout the organization, it's always a great way to address your recruitment challenges. And ultimately, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is organizations have really become data-driven. So what is really data-driven recruitment? It's really looking at what are your recruitment metrics that you would look like. If you have some access to systems or database, it's just looking at things like how many candidates you're getting per application, how many candidates are moving through the interview process, how many candidates are moving into the hiring process, how successful are you with the job postings that you or the external job sites that you're using, so you're actually getting an understanding of the value for the money you invest in your recruitment process, because sometimes some of these career sites have a cost attached to it. So if they do, you may want to have an understanding. So I think data-driven decisions, it's about understanding your return on investment throughout your whole recruitment process. Ultimately, you want to make data-driven decisions, meaning that you had all the data necessary to make the best decision in the hiring process for you. So thinking of, like how, what other are some of the key data? Oh, the how many postings you have to do. Like sometimes you have to post a job several times throughout because you were unable to attract any candidates. So all of those give you a good understanding of what is the recruitment looking like for your organization, and for future reference that will also help you build your targeted talent acquisition strategies. Do we have any questions before we move into the next activity? I'm trying to see if we have any. I don't see any particular questions yet. There were comments about the great co-op programs. It's a great way to facilitate employment for students. Absolutely. That is great. Okay, I wonder if we can move to the next activity. Lynn, please. Okay, so I wanted to do something. Oh, I see a question. Any specific tips about recruiting Indigenous employees? That is a great question. I really struggle with like the content that I wanted to do this presentation, because diversity strategies for recruitment can take us, like hours and hours to talk about. Networking with post-secondary Indigenous institutions has been a great way for, particularly for us as in the government of Saskatchewan, to attract Indigenous candidates. There are, in my previous employment, or like in previous organizations that I worked with, I worked directly with agencies that supported and worked with Indigenous communities and help us with targeting our job postings and our job ads with language that would be attractive for Indigenous individuals. Other things is, if you have the opportunity to designate a position, meaning that you would hire only an individual candidate, it's another strategy that you can use. But I think overall, I would say that what I have experienced proven very successful is actually networking, particularly with Indigenous post-secondary institutions. So your SAIT, your First Nations University, those have been very successful for our organization. I think there's another question. No, I think that was a question. Okay. So what the next activity is, we're going to play a little video about an interview, and then we're going to break up into rooms, and I will ask you a couple questions. Then you'll have a discussion for about 7 minutes in your breakout rooms, and then we'll come back to have a discussion. So I'll ask the questions after we watch the video. So Lynn, I wonder if you can play that video, and hopefully the audio will go through. I don't hear the audio. I don't know if anyone else does.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, great. We're looking for someone who has a lot of experience in this work.
I thought this was an entry-level position.
Yes, well, experienced entry level. Experience is sort of implied. We're looking for someone who's really a team player, but who can also work independently as well. So it's really important that the person who fills this role is someone who has a lot of initiative, won't rock the boat, will shake things up, but takes a very cautious approach to making decisions. Is a real risk taker, but plays by the rules. We don't like to micromanage around here, but we do require hourly status updates. In fact, I just do via video chat. I just keep it open. In fact, hey Steve, how are you?
Hey, how you
All right, we're doing the interview right now. Just wanted to update you on that. Say hi to Steve. Steve, we're looking for someone who's confident but not overly confident, innovative but traditional, easy to work with, but with a bit of an edge. You know, I think reliable maverick is the best way I can sum up this position. This is indeed an experienced entry level position, so the offer can reflect that. But we do have a lot of great snacks in the kitchen. Kind of all. She's gone, Steve.
I think we had a couple of people that were unable to hear the video, but some could. Hopefully everyone was able to hear the video. Yes, I see some noddings. Perfect. Okay. So Lynn is going to break out into rooms. But what I want you to do is spend some time discussing within your groups what were the right things that were happening in that interview process and what we could have done differently. So put yourself as the interviewer and have a discussion about what was not a good practice to do through an interview and what could be some of the things that we could do differently and better through the interview process. And then we'll come back and we'll have kind of a brief discussion in the room. So Lynn, if you want to break them into groups of 4 or 5.
Sure. I'm going to make 11 rooms here and creating them right now.
Perfect. Thank you.
And you said you want them in for 7 minutes or so?
Let's do 6 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. I think we have a few people that are not joining any.
So I wonder what's going on there. Do I move? I'm just going to move them to.
Okay, I think room 4 has 1 person.
Okay, so that person, okay. Why won't it let me to move to room 4? Doesn't make any sense. Because it's got like, when I go, I think you can do the same thing, right? Where it says,
Yeah.
why is it not doing that? Okay. Okay. I don't know I've never had this happen before.
Since we have an unassigned person. Unassigned.
Well, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, okay, that she just, let's just move her to room 4.
Okay.
Okay, because she just joined like a second ago, so.
Yes. Now we have Maria, Wendy, Catherine, Elena.
Okay, so I'm going to, okay, what's going on here? Okay, so we'll have to assign them somewhere. Elena, let's move her to room 8 since we can't move. Since it doesn't seem to let you do it into the one it assigned.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on there. Okay. Catherine, let's move her to room, I don't know.
She shows in room 4 twice. Like it is funny. I don't know what.
I think there's 2 people or something, or yeah, should I move her to is there one that doesn't have many people? Let's move her to 10.
Sure.
If I can find her again here. Kay Fisher, let's move her to.
Like, I wonder if maybe some people are not, like, they are not actually in front of the computer right now. So they're not
That's
showing-
probably the case, I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because like otherwise, well, I'll just move them anyways in
Yeah,
case.
because I see Maria it's in room 2, but she hasn't joined. Wendy, it's room 3. She hasn't joined.
Okay,
So
well,
I'm going to assume that they're not actually.
yeah, that must be the case. I'm not gonna get too stressed out about it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's a couple people that, rooms that because of that, there's only a couple people, but that's fine. They'll have a good discussion with each other.
That's good. Good. So the timing's great.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, no, it's the last section is not so in depth as the whole recruitment piece. I always find the recruitment piece is quite extensive.
Yeah,
And I really try to do a very high level overview of it.
well, this is true, right? Like, I mean, they teach entire semesters on
Yes.
just
on the-
this topic,
yes.
right? Alone, right? So,
Yes. Yes, totally.
so I should, yeah, well, I guess I can keep the slideshow on here, I guess, because you're going to be just going to the next, after we
Yes.
do this.
Yes, if you want to do it, like still leave it on slide 7, then we'll do a quick discussion around. Like I'm
Sure.
thinking for a few moments, and then we'll move into, like, I really have like 3 more slides to go through.
Perfect. Nope, that sounds good. I don't know what's going on with my keyboard today, but I seem to have figured out how to do it with my mouse. I don't know, like there's some
well,
gremlin.
Yesterday, they did an upgrade on like Microsoft in my computer, and my email was so messed up.
Really?
It took me, yes, because it's like it's a new Outlook version, and it looks very different than what it used to look before. But then I realized, like, my PowerPoint looks different. Like, it has so many different functions. It's the new, like, Microsoft 360, I think is what they call it.
Oh, okay.
And it is so different. It is very different than what it was before. So yesterday was like a relearning day for me. They upgrade systems so quickly. It's kind of hard to be on top of all of the changes.
That's true.
Yes. Okay, time is up. Yeah, let's close the rooms.
Okay. So it gives them another 60 seconds. So they can finish up their conversations.
Yep.
Hopefully they've been having good ones. I know people always say they enjoy this part